Hey guys, so what are we learning and doing today? Well, today you will closely read parts of Chapter 8 to answer text-dependent questions and focus on character traits, point of view, and character actions. Let's take a look at our learning targets. I can identify character traits of characters in Peter Pan. Number 2, I can compare my point of view to the point of view of the narrator or characters. These are learning targets that we've been working towards and have done since the beginning of reading Peter Pan. Remember, character traits are what is the character's personality? Who are they like? In order to determine a character trait, we have to ask ourselves, what is the character doing? What is the character saying? And what does the character want? We have some examples on the side here where we have the character and the type of trait that you've given some of them. So Wendy can be responsible, she can be motherly, a worrier. John can be trusting, doesn't worry. Peter can be carefree, irresponsible, and untrustworthy. Point of view. Point of view, remember, is the way that the character sees or thinks about a situation. In order to find out a character's point of view, you need to think about the age of the character, because that tells you what kind of experiences that they've had in their life. Either not a lot because they're young, or a lot of experiences because they're older. You're also going to look at the character's actions or thoughts during the situation or event. And you're going to ask yourself, what does the character feel in this moment? And as you are reading or listening to Chapter 8 today, you're going to be thinking about the point of view of Wendy. Now, last week we read so many chapters, and I just want to briefly review what happened in each chapter in preparation for our lesson today. Starting with Chapter 5. Peter, Tinkerbell, and the Darling Children all fly to Neverland. They sometimes fall asleep, and then this is where we see Peter being carefree and untrustworthy because he does some really mean things to the Darling Children as they're sleeping. And at the end of the chapter, the pirates fire cannons at them and they all become separated. Then we pick up in Chapter 6. We're introduced to each group in Neverland, such as the Lost Boys, the Pirates, and the Indians. Specifically, we get a closer look at Captain Hook, who has a rivalry against Peter. We learn that Peter cut off his hand, and that's how his name is Hook, because he has a hook for a hand. So he finds the Lost Boys' cave and plans to bake a cake for the Lost Boys that will make them sick. In Chapter 7, we come back to the Darling Children and Peter and Tinkerbell because, remember, they were blasted away in different directions. So in Chapter 7, we're picking up with Tinkerbell and Wendy. They're blown off together, in which Tinkerbell finally sees the Lost Boys, tells the Lost Boys to shoot Wendy, and they do because they've never seen or knew who she was. Luckily, the arrow catches on the acorn around her neck, and she isn't hurt too badly. Then we see a disconnect between Peter and Tinkerbell. They get into this fight. He says to never return. Wendy says that's okay, but Tinkerbell's still mad. And then we see finally the Lost Boys building a house for Wendy because they want her to be their mother. And though we have Chapter 8, something worse than the night. Ooh. As always, you are more than welcome to read with me, or you may listen. If you are reading, you can always mute and then look for the stop sign symbol at the very end of the chapter to unmute so you can hear the rest of the lesson. Peter Pan, Chapter 8, Something Worse Than the Night. The next morning, the Darling Children were measured for their trees. Hook, if you recall, thought it was silly to have one tree for each Lost Boy, but it actually made a great deal of sense. Each different-sized boy had a door that fit him as perfectly as a tailored suit. This way, they could all enter the cave at once, without having to wait in line. More important, no other body except each lost boy's exact body could fit in that particular tree. This was especially helpful in case of sneak pirate attacks. After a few days' practice, the Darling children became very quick and graceful about using their trees. To enter the cave, they sucked their breath in, and down they went at exactly the right speed. To rise, they sucked in and blew out, and so wiggled up. They also grew to love their underground home. It was simple and sweet, a bit like camping. Even Wendy stayed there now. It was lonely in her own house, and this felt so much more like a real family. The cave was one large cozy room with a floor made of dirt. The boys used mushrooms as chairs and sawed-off tree trunks as tables. There was one big bed on which all the boys, except Michael, slept, packed in like sardines in a tin. Because space was so tight, there was a strict rule against turning around until one boy gave the signal. And then everyone had to turn at once. Michael could have slept in the bed, too. There was always room in Neverland for one more. But he was the littlest, and Wendy liked to pretend that he was her baby. So she hung him in a basket next to her bed. Her pet wolf, who followed her everywhere, slept on the floor, guarding them both. Tinkerbell also lived in the cave, in a tiny space carved into the wall, no larger than a bird cage. Over the entrance to her room hung a curtain that she could pull shut when she wanted privacy. Small as Tink's room was, it was the fanciest part of the whole cave, filled with the finest fabrics, soft tiny bedspreads, and delicately carved antique furniture. Your house may be bigger, Tinkerbell informed Wendy, but mine is better. Still, Wendy had bigger concerns than whether Tink's house was better. The boys kept her so busy, cooking and cleaning and sewing, that weeks would sometimes go by before she left the cave and saw daylight. It makes one long for the old single life, she thought wistfully. As a real grown-up might. Now, as for her parents, she missed and worried about them, but there was something about Neverland that made time and those worries blur. Somehow she was confident that the bedroom window and her parents' arms would always remain open for her to fly back into. What did disturb Wendy, however, was the fact that John was starting to forget their parents, and Michael has already forgotten them entirely. He actually thought she was his real mother. To fix this, Wendy set up a little school with their old life as the subjects instead of spelling or math. The other boys wanted to go to school too, so she let them sit in. Of course, they always failed the quizzes, especially the ones with hard questions like, what colors are mother's eyes? How did we spend last Christmas? And describe father's laugh. Peter never came to school or took a quiz. He said it was because he despised mothers and holidays, and even sometimes laughs. But really, it was that he couldn't read or write. While the other boys were in school, Peter would go off alone. Whether he went on real or imaginary adventures, Wendy could never tell, unless she or one of the boys had gone with Peter. Sometimes not even them, but Wendy had many of her own adventures. Which tale would you like to hear? The night attack by the Indians on the underground cave, when a few of them got stuck in the hollow trees like a fat Santa on chimneys? Or perhaps time Peter saved Tiger Lily's life in the Mermaid Lagoon and so made her a lifelong friend. Maybe I should tell you instead about the cakes the pirates baked and kept leaving it around to make the boys sick, but which Wendy kept finding and snatching from the hands of her children until it got stale and they didn't want it anymore. Oh, and Hook even tripped over the hard steel lump in the dark, stubbing his toes. I could tell you about the birds that were Peter's friends, especially the never bird, who lived in the tree above the lagoon, and how her nest fell in the water once. But she kept sitting on it anyway to protect her eggs, and Peter gave orders that no one was to disturb her. A shorter lagoon adventure, and almost as exciting, was Tinkerbell's attempt, with the help of some other fairies, to float a sleeping Wendy back to the mainland on a leaf until Wendy woke up and swam back to Neverland, foiling Tink again. Perhaps the best way to choose is to simply toss a coin. And so the lagoon has won. If you were lucky, when you close your eyes at night, you will sometimes see a lovely lagoon where mermaids live and sing their beautiful songs. When you are awake, the nearest you can get to the lagoon is the beach at sunset in the surf. Children spent long summer days at the lagoon swimming or lazily floating. Much to Wendy's disappointment, the mermaids turned out to be as unfriendly as Tinkerbell. When they weren't splashing her with their tails, they ignored her entirely. The mermaids didn't like the boys' weather, except of course Peter. Peter spent hours talking to the mermaids or sitting on their tails when they got particularly cheeky. The lagoon was the most beautiful at night. When the moon came up and the mermaids began to sing their strange wailing songs to lure the sailors onto rocks. But it was not a safe place for humans then. Wendy knew this and made sure that she always gathered her children and left before dark. On this day, however, as they were all dozing on Marooner's Rock after lunch, something strange and frightening happened. It wasn't night yet, at least. Wendy didn't think it was. But the lagoon seemed to shift around them. Little shivers ran over the water, and shadows replaced the sun. It was not night that had come. It was something worse. And that is the end of chapter 8, Something Worse Than the Night. Ooh, it just got good. Can't wait to hear the next chapter. So let's recap what just happened. Well, we see that the Darling children are finally settling into the cave with Peter and the Lost Boys in Neverland. They're setting it up as if they were a real family. Wendy becomes worried when John and Michael begin to forget their parents, so she starts to give them lessons to hopefully that they can keep their memories of their parents. And we see that the children go on many adventures. How does this chapter build on the previous ones? In this chapter, Wendy, John, and Michael arrive in Neverland with Peter. And this chapter builds on this by showing them settled into a new way of life. Here's some questions for you to think about. What do you know after reading this chapter? What questions do you have about this chapter? And what do you think is going to happen next? What is that something worse that's there now? You can pause the video, answer the questions in Google Classroom, and come back to watch the rest of the lesson. Okay, guys, we're going to do another language dive. Remember, we're going to take one sentence, break it apart, and have a better and a deeper understanding of what the author is trying to tell us. So we have this sentence here. Much to Wendy's disappointment, the mermaids turn out to be as unfriendly as Tinkerbell. So I took that one whole sentence and I chunked it into 3 main parts. We're going to look at each part individually, figure out what each section means, put it all together to make a new sentence, and hopefully we will have a better understanding. Okay, first chunk. Much to Wendy's disappointment. What does this chunk tell us? Well, we know that it's about Wendy because it says her name. But what about Wendy? What is happening here in the sentence with Wendy? Disappointment. Disappointment. I've heard of the word disappointed, which mean the same thing. So now I have to think about a time when I've said disappointed. Oh, I know. I am disappointed to know that we won't be returning back to school until May. What could I be feeling if I were to say that? Or if you've heard it, what do you think they were feeling? Here, Wendy is sad. Disappointment is sad. I'm feeling sad to know that I can't be with you guys until May. Here, Wendy is sad, but do we know why yet? No, we don't. Hopefully that next chunk will tell us why Wendy is sad. Okay, here's the next one. The mermaids turned out to be. Who's the sentence about? Well, the mermaids. Is there any other information? I see the words turned out to be. Turned out to be is just another way to say are. So the mermaids are. Okay, so Wendy is sad. The mermaids are. Do we know what the mermaids are yet? No. Hopefully that third chunk will tell us. But let's take those two and bring them back together. Much to Wendy's disappointment, the mermaids turned out to be. So that first chunk, we broke it down and looked at, oh, its focus, its noun is Wendy. Wendy is disappointed and Wendy is sad because the mermaids are. So we broke those two chunks down. We formed what it meant in one sentence. Wendy is sad because the mermaids are. Now, I bet that that third chunk will tell us what the mermaids are. Here it is. As unfriendly as Tinkerbell. What are the mermaids? And why does the author compare the mermaids to Tinkerbell? Oh, unfriendly. So the mermaids are unfriendly. What does that word mean? You could say not kind, mean, rude. I'm going to use the word mean. Now, who are they comparing it to again? Oh, Tinkerbell. Do we see Tinkerbell being unfriendly or mean in the chapter or in Peter Pan? We do. We see that Tinkerbell try to kill Wendy. She pulled her hair. She was calling her mean names. So the mermaids are mean like Tinkerbell. And do we see the mermaids being mean to Wendy? We do. Remember, the mermaids were splashing Wendy and ignoring her entirely. So it was making that comparison. Think of that as our unit in figurative language, making that comparison of two different things and finding what's similar about them. So I have all the chunks. Much to Wendy's disappointment, the mermaids turned out to be as unfriendly as Tinkerbell. I went through and I broke apart each section and I came up with the new sentence. Wendy is sad because the mermaids are mean like Tinkerbell. I would be sad too if I had high hopes to see a mermaid and they were splashing me. Okay, so we're gonna try this again, that comparison of two things that are similar to each other. So I am as as. Okay. So I can make a new sentence by adding an adjective, something that describes a descriptive word, as a noun. So a person, place, thing, idea. Okay. I am as energetic. Let's use the word energetic. Okay. Energetic. And what is it? What thing can be energetic? Oh, a puppy. I am as energetic as a puppy. So I'm comparing myself, my energy level, as the same amount as you would see in a puppy. Now you try it. What could you put in for yourself as an adjective, and what can that be compared as? I am as awesome. Okay, let's go back to our learning targets. I can identify character traits of characters in Peter Pan. I can compare my point of view to the point of view of the narrator or characters. After this video, you're going to be meeting those learning targets by telling me character traits of some of the characters that we've seen in Peter Pan. How have they developed? How have their character traits have changed with the new experiences? And learning target number 2, you're going to tell me the point of view of Wendy and compare it to your point of view. Would you do the same as her? Here are some examples of the text-dependent questions that you will be answering. The text says, each different sized boy had a door that fit him as perfectly as a tailor's suit. There was one big bed on which all the boys, except Michael, slept, packed in like sardines in a tin. You're going to take those two sentences, break it apart into chunks like I did, then try to find the meaning of each section to create a new sentence. Then again, you're going to identify the character traits that Wendy shows, what she thinks and feels about a certain situation, and would you do the same as Wendy? All right, friends, that is the end of our lesson. Go ahead and complete the Google form. Make sure you hit the submit button at the very end, and I'll talk to you later. Good luck.